It's gut wrenching. I mean, you see these kids, they're in trunks of vehicles, young boys, young girls. They're so relieved when they see your faces. It's almost as if like they've seen an angel. You can see the desperation in their eyes, the fear as well. Texans are just fed up. Americans are fed up. You're fed up. I'm fed up. For years, we have been gaslit, lied to, and called racist or conspiracy theorists for being concerned about the southern border. That's insane. I can tell you this because my mom was an immigrant from Cuba. I speak Spanish fluently. I travel to Mexico quite frequently. I travel to Central America. I love the people. I love that part of the world. But we do not want our borders to be wide open. We do not want to be responsible for a humanitarian crisis and a national security crisis and a fentanyl poisoning crisis and a drug crisis that is destroying our nation. Our ranches have been ruined here in Texas. Lives have been cut short by addictions. Women and children have been abused by untold numbers. I was talking to a Texas DPS friend of mine earlier today about Houston. And the growing number of human trafficking victims in that area is unheard of. And it has to be exposed. But no matter how many times we expose it, the federal government lies. They lie to you. They lie about our federal agents that are on the ground, those boots on the ground, and they lie about our state and local officials. They are constantly lying and people are dying. That is what is happening. Children are being abused by untold numbers. We don't even know the numbers because of the refusal of our leaders to protect the people they swore they would protect. No longer. We're not going to put up with it anymore. I know you're not. I know I'm not. This is an election year. And guess what? Governor Abbott was so tired of good people in my state being smeared and sacrificed for the ridiculous open border policy of the Biden administration that he decided it was time for action. And last week, Texas DPS just took full control of Shelby Park area in Eagle Pass. It's an area I've reported to you so many times from both my podcast as well as the Sean Hannity show on Fox News. They put up concertina wire and walls around the area and they said, no more. We're not putting up with this, basically with this crap anymore from the federal government. Finally, one of our elected officials is putting his citizens first and protecting us. But there was a tragedy on the Rio, like we've seen every single day, even more so than we've ever seen in the past with Biden in office. These last 3 years, the death toll between this landmass between the United States and Mexico has risen to over 2,000. Yes. And God only knows how many more that have not been counted, that have been lost to the environment that we'll never know about. And I have Lieutenant Chris Olivarez on the show today. He's a spokesman for the Texas Department of Public Safety. He is going to combat the lies that are coming from the United States government, particularly the lie that somehow Texas DPS and Governor Greg Abbott, this is what the White House was saying, is responsible for the deaths of these people in the Rio. No, sir. No, Mr. President. The buck stops at your desk. This is your policy. And I hope you're listening, President Biden, because Lieutenant Chris Olivarez is going to tell you exactly why this is your responsibility and that the tragedy was nothing more than a horrible tragedy. And that even the Department of Justice, your Department of Justice, Mr. President, has laid out a timeline that proves that the state of Texas was not responsible for these deaths whatsoever. And in fact, it is your policy that is responsible for these deaths. And I will explain in just a moment. But first, my pillow, folks. Mike Lindell is willing to tell the truth. He's always out there fighting the good fight. And now he has one of his biggest sales of the year with My Pillow. The Giza Dream bed sheets for as low as $29.98. All set of pillowcases only $9.98, and rejuvenate your bed with the My Pillow mattress topper for as low as $99.99. You're not going to beat that anywhere. Visit mypillow.com/Carter, CARTER, and enter code Carter at checkout for big discounts, including the Giza Dream bed sheets for as low as $29.98. Go to mypillow.com/Carter, CARTER, code Carter, mypillow.com/Carter, code Carter, or call 1-800-685-7221. I'm so grateful to have my friend, and I think a true warrior in this fight against our federal government's actions of keeping the border wide open. I've got Lieutenant Chris Olivarez on here. By the way, spokesman for Texas Department of Public Safety, one of the greatest institutions in the United States. Thank you, Chris, for being on the Sara Carter Show.
Thank you, Sara. Always a pleasure to be here with you and, talking about these issues. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm so grateful that you're on because I know you've been just so overwhelmed and busy. There's been so much happening along the U.S.-Mexico border, and particularly in Shelby Park. I mean, I was stunned when I heard the reports coming across of the drowning deaths of 3 migrants, and now this extraordinary battle. I call it the battle of David and Goliath between the Biden administration and Governor Greg Abbott and the institutions here in my great state of Texas. Talk a little bit about what happened. Take us through the migrant drownings, what the White House is saying about that, and how the White House is trying to put those deaths on the state of Texas instead of where it actually should be, which is right on the White House.
Well, and I appreciate you, giving me the opportunity to clear up some of this, this misinformation that has been shared or released over the weekend, and even up until right now to today, I was still seeing some video from even political figures that was still hammering down, still saying that Texas is responsible for these drownings, which again, that has been debunked. We have proven that on the DPS side. Texas National Guard, they proved that as well. They released a statement, Saturday evening. And the problem was that a lot of statements and even some of the media were so quick to put a headline out saying that, Texas is responsible because they restricted access to U.S. Border Patrol so they could not, rescue or save these migrants that drowned, which included a female adult and 2 children. And of course, we saw that. And of course, I knew, just based on history and based on our experiences on the border, that there has to be, more to this issue, more to this actual event. And sure enough, I did some digging around. I spoke to people, and what we know, even that day, Saturday, when this took place, when this statement came out, even from Congressman Guayad, and again, Congressman Guayad, he's been very vocal, especially against the federal government with the current border situation. But I think by releasing a statement and not really gathering all the facts, kind of put us in a situation where a lot of people were pointing the finger at Texas and blaming Texas for these drowning deaths, which again was not the case. So what we found out was that the Mexican authorities actually responded to a situation across from Shelby Park, which is Piedras Negras in Mexico. They recovered an adult female and a child that was in distress from the river. That was at around 8 p.m. And then at 9 p.m., an hour later, they contacted Border Patrol, the Mexican authorities, and they told them that they had just responded to the river. They recovered a female adult and a child. They were suffering from hypothermia. They were transported to a hospital in Mexico. But in addition to that, they did report that another female adult and 2 children, 8 and 10 ages, drowned in that same area, which is on the Mexican side of the river. So all this took place in Mexico. The Mexican authorities responded. This had nothing to do with the fact that Border Patrol was restricted access to the park because, tragically, regardless of the fact, Border Patrol would not have been able to do anything to save the lives of those migrants, even ourselves. We have soldiers that are there positioned along the river, troopers, and in many cases, this has been an area that has been known for numerous deaths, numerous drownings that's been taking place over the years. And even up until
I can attest to that. I can attest to that. I can attest to that because I was down there with you on one occasion last year. I was actually covering the show for Sean Hannity. And while I was going, right before I went live, a body had come down the river, the Rio, and had floated down the river. There's a little island so that everybody understands. It's kind of not even an island. It's a landmass that is in the low area of the water. And part of that landmass falls right into Mexico. And one of the bodies of somebody who attempted to cross the river, it's such a dangerous crossing, a horribly dangerous crossing because it tricks you. It looks peaceful on top, but the undercurrent is so fast that it just grabs right at your legs and just swoops you under. And we've seen that ourselves. We actually saw a victim. Remember that, Chris? The one time we saw the lady that was drowning?
Yes, absolutely.
When she was
so that's
rescued.
Why, I think a lot of these, illegal immigrants, when they're coming across, and let's see, they've been coming across for the last 3 years, and they underestimate the river there in that specific area there in Eagle Pass because it does look calm. And in some cases, the water is very low. The water level is very low where you can just walk across, but it's that current underneath. And we don't know exactly at this particular moment when this situation happened how the water level was. If the water level was high, we know it was very cold. That's going to play a factor as well. The current as well plays a factor. And plus, this was at night. So at night, we don't have boat patrol, on the river. Even U.S. Border Patrol, they don't have boats in the river. Usually we patrol during the day. So that's what makes it more dangerous for, legal immigrants to cross the river. It's dangerous in itself to cross, but more specifically at night to cross that river. Because, again, you just don't know what's really happening with that river as far as the water level, the current, different factors. And that's why we see so many loss of life. But what's very, disturbing about this whole situation was the fact that, these lives were being politicized, right? They're pointing fingers at Governor Abbott, they're pointing fingers at Texas, National Guard, saying that we're to blame. But yet, when you look at the last 3 years, the amount of deaths, this current administration, there's been a record number of migrant deaths, close to 2,300 already in the last 3 years. And yet no one talks about that. No one talks about that. No one talks about, children that are drowning, and the fact that our soldiers, if we look back at 2022, Bishop Evans, National Guard soldier, risked his own life to jump in the river there in Eagle Pass and drowned. And it turns out those illegal immigrants that he was trying to rescue were drug smugglers. But yet no one talks about
exactly.
that. Right? Some of the media won't talk about that. Some of these political figures won't talk about that because it doesn't fit the narrative. Right now, the fact that Governor Abbott deployed troopers and National Guard to Shelby Park to take it over, now some of those individuals want to make this politicized, right? And they're politicizing this event. And now, of course, it fits the narrative, right, that, Texas caused these drownings because you're keeping agents out from the park, which is completely false. That's inaccurate. And we know for a fact that many deaths have occurred tragically because of the current policies that are taking place. And that's what's causing this. It's not so much the access to the park or any area along the river. And that's one thing that the listeners need to understand is that it's these policies, regardless of your political affiliation, the fact that this current federal government is encouraging people, children, to cross a river in order to seek asylum. That is just outrageous. You would think that if they truly cared about the lives of these migrants, that they would focus their efforts on trying to protect them so they don't have to cross a river. They can go to a port of entry. We have 29 ports of entries in Texas. Why aren't they using their resources, their efforts to try to stop illegal border crossing? So then you don't have this loss of life that we're seeing, but they refuse to do so. And of course, they want to continue blaming Texas because we're trying to stop that. We're the only ones trying to stop that. When you have...
This is their policy, Chris. I mean, look.
Exactly.
This is the policy of the Biden administration. And you and I have seen this over and over again the last 3 years. You're right. The number of migrant deaths is astounding. The United Nations considers the landmass between the United States and Mexico one of the most dangerous crossings in the world. And that is a fact. And that is based not only on the environment, but the cartels and the human trafficking and the victimization of the migrants that are coming into the United States. This is a Biden policy. And this also appears to be like, and I've said this to you before, it's like David and Goliath. It's like the state of Texas is David. It's fighting Goliath, the federal government that's saying, we're not going to do anything. We're just going to leave it wide open. And I want to make this clear so that everyone out here who is listening to us right now really understands. Anzalduas Park. Remember when the city took over the park, Chris?
Yep.
And Anzalduas Park was being kept from all the media. Why? Because Catholic Charities was bringing in thousands of migrants with the aid of the federal government, processing them, there in giant tents during COVID, releasing migrants out into the state of Texas. Some of them were COVID positive. There were a lot of stories broke on that, and keeping the residents out of the park. Well, Shelby Park has been afflicted with a very similar problem. Not only do you have all these migrants coming across, but all the Border Patrol and National Guard do is say, hey, media, get out of here. We don't want you guys to look at this, especially with BP. You know, they're unfortunately, that's what's coming from their supervisors. And they keep the media away. They take over the park. They make it impossible for the governor to do his job. They process everyone there, and then they release them into our country. Am I right?
Right. I mean, you're absolutely right. And, going back, even if you look at this past December, we had the highest level, the highest number of illegal crossings ever, over 300,000. And in Eagle Pass alone, there by Shelby Park, I mean, we were averaging 4,000 to 5,000 a day. You saw the images on some of the media outlets and the reporting where you just had this large group, massive group in a field that was being processed by Border Patrol. In addition to that, you had all the agents in that sector, in that area, which is the Del Rio sector, pulled from the front lines to process. You had Border Patrol checkpoints that were shut down, that were completely wide open now because those agents were diverted to process. A port of entry for legitimate trade and travel was shut down by the federal government so those agents could help process. So, what we're doing right now and what the governor's been trying to do, even up until right now at Shelby Park, is to prevent another situation like that, like we saw under that bridge in Eagle Pass at Shelby Park. We cannot sustain that. We cannot continue to have that where you continue to pull all these agents from the field so they can just conduct administrative duties by processing people. And what is that going to do? It's just going to continue to attract more illegal immigration because they know for a fact, okay, this is where we need to go. We go to this bridge. We're going to get processed. We're going to get a notice to appear, show up for a court date 5-8 years from now, and then get released to the country wherever we want to go. That is not sustainable. We cannot allow that, especially here in Texas, since we're at the forefront of this border situation. So that's the whole concept of trying to take over this park. And to prevent that is to prevent not agents from doing their job, but to prevent another processing center being set up where it's going to continue to attract, illegal immigration. We just simply cannot.
Well, and that's not. And that's not what the agents were supposed to be doing. That is not their edict. Even if you go on the website, they are supposed to be the front line of defense. And that's our Border Patrol agents. They are supposed to be the front line of defense for our national security on the U.S.-Mexico border. And they're not. They're being used by the federal government as babysitters, processors, movers, and shakers of the new global migration movement. And Shelby Park and Anzalduas Park and all of these properties have become basically kind of like a focal point for the human trafficking organizations. Well, if we get you to Shelby Park, there'll be a bunch of people there to process you and a giant bus that will take you. It's almost like you created a pseudo immigration processing center there. And I saw it with my own eyes just a few weeks ago when I was down there with Jason Jones. And it's the reason why Jason Jones, Tom Homan, Derek Maltz, I can go on and on and on. I know there's so many, Victor Avila, why we're all part of this new Border 911 group to investigate and expose this because of exactly what you are saying. Do you think the NGOs are like fuming now that you took back Shelby Park? I mean, I really believe that, we've seen a lot of money end up in both in Mexico and in the United States, hundreds of millions of dollars, by the way, in the pockets of NGOs that are helping process these illegal migrants. What do you think about that now? Do you think they're fuming?
Absolutely.
You think you guys are putting a dent in it?
Absolutely. I think that, some of these NGOs are putting pressure now on the federal government, right? Because we know that they get federal aid, millions of dollars, right, to help facilitate what the federal government is doing right now. And that is, essentially, trafficking people. That's typically and that's really what they're doing. If you look at it, the reality of it. I mean, people come across illegally. They go through these NGOs. The NGOs are, getting millions of dollars to then, move people further into the interior, put them on a bus, put them on a plane, whatever the case is, and they continue doing that. And of course, that just continues to attract, more people to come, more illegal immigrants to come to the country because they know that they're getting that assistance. This truly is,
and they have an incentive.
this truly is an invasion by invitation, right? I mean, we know that the fact that so many people by the thousands are coming across every single day, and it's all because of what's happening now with this current administration and what they've allowed, and also putting these agents. And I like to go back to the agents, right? Because I always try to do as much as I can to speak on their behalf. Even though obviously we're two separate agencies, but we've always had this long working relationship with U.S. Border Patrol, and I feel for these agents. I talk to them. We have a great relationship with them, despite what the federal government is trying to do right now, and they're trying to create this divide between the state of Texas and U.S. Border Patrol, which again, we won't stand for that. I mean, we support each other. We know right now they're just being demoralized, especially now with this current situation, and trying to put them in the middle now of this battle between Texas and the federal government. And it shouldn't be that way. Really, if this federal government really cared about the job of these agents, their livelihood, they will let them do their job and do what they're good at, right? They're good at being out in the front lines, going after the criminals, the suspected terrorists, all the threats to public safety and national security. That's what they want to do, but their hands are tied. And now they're getting caught in the middle of this battle between Texas and the federal government.
Well, that's an important point. Jenny Terra, who used to work with me, she worked with me for 3.5 years, or a little bit more than 3 years. She is now with the Daily Caller. I'm very proud of her work. She was out on the border and she wrote a story stating Border Patrol agents quietly support Texas's move to seize the area of the border. So it's pretty much, I think they feel the same way as you. I think that when your boots on the ground, you know what is going on. It is these people in Washington, D.C. that are basically using Border Patrol agents as puppets. The morale of the BP has never been so low, skyrocketing, unfortunately, suicide rates. In Border Patrol is evidence of that. And as compared to the past, and I've interviewed wives of these Border Patrol agents and that are so frustrated. They say that they don't even know what to do. They've literally neutered them from their job. They have effectively made Border Patrol basically like a babysitting agency for many of the people coming across the border. And now we've been talking about deaths. You and I both know, Lieutenant Olivarez, we have seen it. We saw that woman drowning. My gosh, we almost jumped into the water to save her that night until the smuggler beat us to it because he was out there on a boat and we could barely see it, so dark along the Rio. We could just hear her screaming and begging for her life. This is a very dangerous area. This crossing, it's not only the human traffickers and the cartels, but it's the environment. And these NGOs are pocketing so much money. They're paying out very little of, I believe, of what they are putting in their pockets. And that's what's so enticing to them. There's no incentive, really, is there, Lieutenant Olivarez, to stop doing this vicious circle?
Yeah, there's not. I spend a lot of time on the front lines. I'm always out there as much as I can with our troopers and the soldiers. And you've been out there with us numerous times as well. Over the last 3 years, and it does get very frustrating, right? Because we're there to try to prevent people from crossing that river in the first place, right? That's why Governor Abbott deployed troopers and National Guard to that area, to Shelby Park, to Eagle Pass, and some of these other main crossing areas to set up barriers, whether it be concertina wire along the river or having soldiers positioned along the river. Right now we have all these different barriers and different infrastructure in place. We went even as far as, placing loudspeakers, along the river that are pretty much, conveying a message, in Spanish, don't cross, it's dangerous, go to port of entry. And we have signs that are displayed along the river. We're doing all these preventive measures to deter illegal border crossings and to save lives at the same time. And yet you look anywhere along the border, and you don't see nothing, nothing at all from any of these, some of these open border activists, or even the federal government to actually prevent anyone from crossing that river, especially children. They simply don't do that, but they're so quick to criticize Texas when we step in and try to do something. And when we do something, it's inhumane or it's cruel. But yet it's quite the opposite. Where I think we actually, just based off our efforts, we've actually saved more lives. Because you think about it, if we weren't there taking that posture along the river, standing there trying to stop people from crossing, I can almost guarantee that we would see many more deaths occurring along that river, especially when all the agents are tied up processing in other areas. There would be no one to respond to those areas or to rescue some of these migrants that are crossing. Our boat operators that are in that area, they perform hundreds of rescues, pulling, adults and children out of the water, doing CPR, pulling dead bodies out of the river the day after or days later. I mean, these are events that are going to stay with these agents, these troopers, these boat operators for years to come. These are events that are going to be with them, from now on, to see these tragic events taking place. Little kids that are in the water that they have to pull out of the river because they drowned. And why? Because they're being enticed. They're being encouraged to cross the river because they know if they make it, they're going to get released into the country. And that's a problem right there. And that's where that needs to stop, because if we can stop that, obviously we'll stop those crossings and more. I'll even go a step beyond that. The human smuggling. You stop border crossings, illegal border crossings between ports of entry, you're going to stop human smuggling, especially children that are being smuggled in some of these cars. And we talked about this too, you and I, and how, our state troopers have rescued over 900 children because of our efforts in Texas, and because of what Governor Abbott has been able to do by deploying these additional state resources to the border. Over 900 children that were being smuggled in vehicles that our state troopers were able to recover, that could have possibly been forced into some type of sex or labor trafficking, which we know that happens in many of these cases.
I know. And some of the pictures that, we have shared, you have shared with me, and things that I've seen when I'm at the border, it's gut wrenching. I mean, you see these kids, they're in trunks of vehicles, young boys, young girls. They're so relieved when they see your faces. It's almost as if like they've seen an angel. You can see the desperation in their eyes, the fear as well. And you brought up something that's so important, Lieutenant. And I really think it's like one of those things that we all know, but we never say out loud. But it would be so simple. Why doesn't the White House or the federal government or the Border Patrol, for that matter, have huge signs saying, "Do not cross dangerous river"? Why don't they do it with our partners in Mexico? Why don't they put all that up? Why don't they make it obvious? It's because they want an open policy. And I want you to talk about this as well. You do your best. I know the Texas DPS is phenomenal at this, and Governor Greg Abbott is amazing at trying to push this message out. Do not come. It is too dangerous. But you have NGOs coaching migrants on what to say at the border. So it's almost as if your message is getting drowned out by the people that are open borders activists.
And it does get drowned out because, obviously, migrants, they're not going to want to hear us, and I'm talking about the state, trying to keep them from crossing, right? I mean, when they know for a fact that they've been told even before they even enter the river, this is where you need to go. As long as you make it here, we're going to give you all the resources. We're going to send you to wherever you want to go, wherever your destination is. Don't worry about it. You just got to make it across the river.
Well, and they get cash cards. They get cell phones. They get, clothes.
Who's not going to want to take that chance or risk their life or their children's life to cross the river, knowing that as long as I can make it across this river or a desert, depending on the terrain, and make it to this processing center, and then eventually get to an NGO, and then from there I make it to where I want to get to. Of course they're going to come. And that's why they keep doing it, knowing those dangers. They keep doing it. Yeah, going back to what you said, I've tried to try to figure out why, if the federal government is so concerned about the lives of these migrants and talking about humanitarian issues and their livelihood and the fact that they're making this perilous journey from their country because they want better lives. We all understand that. We understand that, right? We want people to come to the United States, right? To have a more, a better life, more prosperity, but of course do it the legal way and do it the safe way, right? Right now what's been happening for the last 3 years is not safe. It's not humane. It's the complete opposite. And you would think that they would want to do something or put some type of measures in place to prevent anyone from crossing a river. To me, that still does not make sense. And I think anyone with common sense would agree with that it does not make, it's not the safest way to seek asylum. It's not a normal way to seek asylum to cross a river, risk your life. And not only that, but paying criminals in Mexico, criminal smugglers who have now been able to expand their global network, by the billions. It's $1 billion industry right now, human smuggling, because they're taking full advantage of what's happening right now. But yeah, just as I mentioned, right, we're the only ones right now in the state actually putting some type of measures in place to prevent that from people from crossing the river. And you don't see that from the federal government. You don't see that in Mexico either. We even went as far as, actually communicating with some of the local officials there in Mexico to let them know, try to do your part to stop this from happening. We shouldn't have to do that at the state level. This should be at the federal level. But yeah, we're having to take those extensive measures to do as much as we can to try to prevent what's happening along the border. But we know that we're up against a battle. It's very challenging, especially when we're not only having to, battle or go against these criminals, but also our own federal government is trying to stop us from protecting our own state.
What is the next step in this fight over Shelby Park? Do you think that the governor's going to continue to say, hey, we're not giving up this park right now? Texas DPS, come March, you got SB4, if I'm not mistaken, right? That's going to come into effect. Are you going to be able to make those arrests and return people back to their countries of origin, or at least back into Mexico? Because Mexico will not cooperate. AMLO will not cooperate with the United States if President Biden's policy is to leave the border wide open.
Right. So, as of right now, our posture remains the same. We're not budging. We're still going to continue doing what we're doing overall, especially there at Shelby Park. National Guard is still going to maintain that presence. Nothing's going to change. Mm-hmm. But, going back to, just real quick, just going back to what we're saying about how the federal government is obstructing what we're doing, look at, from day one with Operation Lone Star, right away there was criticism that Governor Abbott's deploying soldiers and troopers to the border. They were trying to stop that. And then the marine barrier, having the first ever marine barrier in the river, right away they wanted to put a stop to that because they said it was inhumane. It was causing death and causing injuries, which we know that was debunked as well because that wasn't the case. And actually, if you had some type of barrier in the middle of the river, that would discourage anyone from crossing. But of course, it just kind of shows how some of these examples of how we're trying to put these measures in place, security measures, and we're being challenged by the federal government. Even with SB4, arresting people. That's another way to deter and apply consequences, is arresting people at the river mm-hmm. that are crossing illegally between the port of entry into the state of Texas. And even with that, they're attacking us and challenging us on that. So we don't know exactly where it's going to go, if we're even going to be able to enforce that come March, depending if they file a lawsuit, which we do expect, we do anticipate. But again, they want open borders. Obviously, they don't want Texas to take any action. They expect for us to look the other way. And I think when this is all said and done, I think the federal government really owes an apology for one, which I don't think we'll get. To our
I don't think you'll get it because remember what happened with the horse. Well, remember what happened with the horse whipping incident. They completely lied about that. These poor agents were made out to be these horrific, racist Border Patrol agents when none of what was said by both President Biden as well as others was true. It was a complete and utter over-exaggerated lie. And now we see what they're doing here. And right now you have the Justice Department on Monday said that the deaths occurred at 8 p.m., an hour before even U.S. federal agents were notified by their Mexican counterparts. But it doesn't even matter, does it? Because they're throwing the lies out there.
Exactly. It doesn't matter. Even with that, even with the Department of Justice releasing that statement and clarifying what actually took place, you still have some today, even right now, this morning, I saw some video of some political figures and still saying that, that Texas still caused these deaths because of what's happening there at Shelby Park. So even with that, because it doesn't fit the narrative, and obviously, no, they're not going to go back and retract their statements. They're not going to apologize to the soldiers or to our troopers. They simply won't do that. I mean, they still haven't apologized to Border Patrol, and that was back in 2021. So we're not going to hold our breath. I think what really keeps us going and kind of keeps that morale, I guess, somewhat in place with us, the fact that, because it is challenging for us. You have many troopers that are away from their families, deployed to the border. Many of them have missed, birthdays, anniversaries, school events. But they do this because they're dedicated to the job, they're dedicated to protecting their state. But I think at the end of it, when it's all said and done, as I mentioned, that the federal government truly owes these men and women from DPS, from National Guard, everyone at the front line, even Border Patrol that's been on the front lines, at this current border, this border situation. They owe them some gratitude. They should thank them because they are doing their job that they should have been doing for the last 3 years. Really stepping in. But of course, again, as I mentioned, we don't expect that. But we have great leadership in Texas, especially fellow Texans that support us, and even outside of Texas that support us, what we're doing. So that's what really drives us to keep moving forward. And I think with the leadership that we have from the governor, from the lieutenant governor, all our Texas legislatures, everybody all the way down to our leadership, keeps us moving. And I think that's what we're going to keep doing. Is we're going to keep, just driving forward and doing as much as we can, as far as despite all the challenges that we may face.
I want to thank again my good friend, Lieutenant Chris Olivarez, who is known by the acronym LT down at the border, LT. But I feel like I got to be one of the guys. Every time I see Chris, he's hanging out, having lunch with Bill Malusian and the gang. And I just show up like right off the border. And I feel like I should just be like, hey, LT, what's going on? By the way, LT was given to him by Lawrence Jones, my good friend Lawrence Jones, who gave Chris his nickname. You and the men and women of the Texas DPS, Lieutenant, are so brave and so amazing, and you do such a miraculous job at protecting not only the state of Texas, but our great nation. God bless you, and thank you for protecting us. Please make sure you're subscribed to the Sara Carter Show on your favorite podcast app. It helps us keep the show free and really gives us a boost in algorithms. This is so important. We really need that boost to keep us going, bringing on all of these great guests. If you're watching on Rumble or YouTube, give us a like and follow us there as well. Thank you so much. Remember, I read all your reviews. Follow me on Truth at Sara Carter Official, on X at Sara Carter DC, and on Instagram at SCarterDC. God bless you. God bless our great nation. God bless our men and women of law enforcement. May they be protected from all of these horrors, and may we shield them, please God, from this crazy administration that is working against them. And God bless the great state of Texas.